Drazhoath the Ashen, demonsmith, sorcerer, exile. Ousted from power by his treacherous rivals, he is destined for a life of miserable servitude in the Black Citadel. Surrounded by foes looking to plunder the ill-gotten gains of the Chaos Dwarfs, it is Drazhoath's lot to defend the interests of Zharr-Nagrund. If we look at the official version of events, let's see here. Centuries of not doing much at all, then a failed siege of Nuln, and then killed by Grimgor Ironhide. What a disappointment. I'm here today to give Drazhoath an alternate, better history. One with all the hallmarks and qualities of a good Chaos Dwarf tale. Betrayal, war, excessive firepower, cities will crumble, armies shall be indiscriminately slaughtered, and Drazhoath will have his revenge on all those who wronged him. Which is a pretty long list. This is my narrative campaign for Drazhoath the Ashen, the most hate-filled lord of the Dhrath-Zharr. Our tale begins at the Black Fortress, the site of Drazhoath's bitter exile. The southern Darklands are a hostile place. Former greenskin laborers have risen up to break the bonds of captivity, and it was up to Drazhoath to remind them that's not part of their contract. He roamed the land, stomping out any whiff of revolt and fleeting concept of freedom, and those that survived the purge were destined for big things. A lifetime in the mines with a slim chance of being drafted into the army and used as fodder. This wasn't a difficult job, nor a particularly important one. Drazhoath had once been a major player in Zharr-Nagrund, the capital and beating heart of the Chaos Dwarf lands. Politics are a cutthroat profession to the Chaos Dwarfs, also known as the Dawi-Zharr or the Dhrath-Zharr in their own tongue. I mean cutthroat, quite literally. If a rival can't be killed, they'll be removed. In Drazhoath's case, he was forced to babysit the southern borders while his former rivals ruled from his former home. As the pockets of resistance were stabbed, shot, and blown to pieces, he happened upon a freak occurrence. Mount Greyhag, which had been a goblin stronghold mere moments ago, had disappeared. Certain that the greenskins did not possess the technology to teleport an entire city and that they were too stupid to hide, Drazhoath sensed something was amiss, and he was correct in these suspicions. In the bowels of the city, they found the Skaven clan Rictus.
Up yours!
Drazhoath hated the Ratmen. He hated their leader, Tretch Craventail. He hated the way they looked, the way they smelled, and he hated their incessant, annoying chittering. He hated their shoddy contraptions, their cowardly ways, and complete and utter lack of discipline. Most of all, he hated that they made terrible slaves, always plotting and scheming and running away. As Drazhoath liked to say, if you want good labor, go green. Tretch Craventail hoped to overwhelm the Dawi-Zharr with sheer numbers and a complete disregard for his soldiers' well-being. Drazhoath met him in kind. He came with hobgoblins, and he was willing to sacrifice as many as it took, and then a few more. His forces dispatched the Skaven and pressed on, all the way to Crookback Mountain. For centuries, Clan Rictus had embarked on raids across the Darklands and the local greenskin tribes. But now, it was time for some long overdue pest extermination. The Dawi-Zharr's ominous siege towers rumbled forth, causing a flurry of frenzied panic from the Raki ranks. Makeshift towers brought down the first, but the others slammed into the walls, spewing goblins upon the defenders. Goblins and Skaven have a fair bit in common. Beyond the obvious similarities of their size, ugliness, and odor, the most important thing about both is that they are entirely dispensable. While the hobgoblins and Skaven killed each other en masse, the ironclad Dhrath-Zharr secured their positions, blocking blunderbusses on the Ratmen. As the rain of bullets began, the fate of the Skaven was sealed, and Crookback Mountain was seized. With their clan hold taken, the remains of Clan Rictus were scattered and hunted down. Drazhoath was an exile, but he still had a job to do, and his victories granted him scraps of influence in the Tower of Zharr, the Chaos Dwarfs' ruling district. But performing your duty will only take you so far in this society. Rather than outperform your neighbor, why not simply kill them? Drazhoath took great pride in crushing and enslaving the northern enclave, however minor they might have been. He toppled their regime and ousted them from their cities. He laid claim to their factories, and the suffocating smoke that billowed from the chimney stacks meant only one thing. He was back in business. As the Tower of Gorgoth fell, the Ashen declared this area the industrial heart of his future empire. This land would make him rich and powerful beyond his wildest dreams, though he couldn't shake the feeling that he was forgetting something. Something quite important. That was it. The Ogre. The ogre kingdoms he was tasked with keeping at bay. Greasus Goldtooth had picked his moment, and while Drazhoath was inspecting his newly acquired factories, he led a charge right into the Darklands. The fact that he'd forgotten about the Ogre menace was an embarrassment that would linger. But then, the Over-Tyrant took his capital. If news of that found its way back to Zharr-Nagrund, Drazhoath would be a laughingstock for all eternity. No, he could not have that at all. He marched to meet the Fat Wazuk, though his force of goblins and dwarves took quite a while to travel cross-country. Understandable, given the size of their legs. Cutting the long journey short, the ogres conveniently ran out to meet Drazhoath. Unfortunately, the two forces met near a shallow river. Well, shallow for the ogres, very, very deep for the dwarfs and goblins. Noblars surged forward, and they were battered away with ease. The ogres, however, were a different story. They barreled into ill-prepared goblins and carved through them like a hot cleaver through a block of green butter. Sadly, the Chaos Dwarf warriors did not fare much better, and Drazhoath's right-hand Castellan was turned into a jellied pulp by Greasus. While the Exile swore vengeance upon the Ogre King, Drazhoath wasn't going to mourn the death of one who may have hypothetically become a rival one day. Besides, he knew the risks of the job. It was all in his contract. The days that followed were confusing ones. Ogres attacked goblins, goblins attacked ogres, another Skaven clan declared war and were never seen from again. There was an unexpected problem with the Tomb Kings, and Drazhoath was threatened by a tree. A retaliation force was sent to retake the capital, and they were able to sneak in through a breach in the wall they'd conveniently left earlier. The Black Fortress was retaken, though the ogres were not going to just sit by and let it be. They crossed into the Darklands with another mighty raiding force, with numbers to shatter the broken legions of Asgore. This is how it ends, Drazhoath thought, crushed beneath the weight of 100 fat ogres. He'd no doubt his former rivals in the Tower of Zharr would be howling in laughter at such a fate. Reluctantly, he lined his soldiers up and awaited the inevitable. They were broken and battered, but if they were going down, they'd go down loud. Drazhoath bombarded the encroaching ogres with infernal magic, summoning colossal hammers that slammed down with the baleful force of Hashut. He unleashed his Kadai Fireball, demonic entities trapped in magma drawn from the deepest, darkest guts of the earth. They arced and dove about the ogre lines, the unbearable heat of them causing havoc on all that came near. As the bound demons put the invaders on the back foot, gunners lined up and fired devastating volleys into their ranks. The biggest among them was brought down, either by fire, shot, or overwhelmed and hacked down by hobgoblin skewers. One flank of the assault fell apart, and the Dhrath-Zharr, in a fit of savage battle lust, shattered the rest of their ranks. It took much of Drazhoath's willpower to pretend he had faith in his troops all this time. And as the Ogre fled back to the mountains, the Exile was adamant not to be made a fool of for the third time. Or fourth. Who's even counting? He replaced his losses and ejected the ogres from the sentinels. They pressed the attack, meeting Greasus in the Valley of Horns. As the Ogre King rumbled towards them, the Exile smirked, for he had the high ground. The fat Wazuk would tire himself out before he even got close. The Ogre thought brute force would see them through, but alas, it did not. After a slow trudge up the slope, they were met with a massive infernal hammer, Drazhoath's way of repaying the favor to Greasus for squashing his right-hand man a few weeks prior. After this crushing defeat, the Ogre King came to the Dawi-Zharr with a bargain, one that was promptly spat on and returned. He'd have the ogre's head one way or another, but once he had that, what then? The world was changing. News had reached him that Karaz-Akarak, mightiest of the dwarven holds, had fallen to the Groby, the goblin hordes of Skarsnik.
Speak up, or I'll take your tongue!
On one hand, this was hilarious to Drazhoath. On the other, he wanted to have the pleasure of defiling the heart of the Karazhan core, the so-called everlasting realm of the dwarves. That pleasure had been denied him, and so he would have Skarsnik's head on a pike. He declared war, but as they moved through the mountains, relocating ogres to new lives of indentured servitude, they came across the war banners of Grimgor Ironhide.
You dare approach me? If I don't like what you say, Mork will be eating your guts tonight.
A constant reminder of the gravest mistake that Dhrath-Zharr ever made. It was Grimgor's destiny to wash over the Darklands and swallow all in his path, leading the greatest war the world had ever known. While Drazhoath did enjoy the idea of his former rivals getting walloped by the world's meanest Black Orc, or Urki-drazh, sadly that also meant he would eventually get walloped too, which he wasn't so keen on. The Chaos Dwarfs are a wartime economy, and declaring two wars at the same time seemed like the move of a very smart economist. But here's the thing about such a plan, it only really works if you win. En route to the former dwarf capital of Karazakarak, a scene of pandemonium was playing out as hobgoblins snuck up on hobless goblins, with all parties seemingly confused as to what they were supposed to be doing. An entire army managed to fit in a very small patch of trees in a battle that was, for want of a better word, so stupid. These goblins are so stupid, the generals thought. Both sides seemed baffled as to what was going on, in a battle that is better forgotten about. Grim tidings were coming in from the mountains of Morn. Grimgor had killed all the remaining ogres, which meant there was no meat shield between him and the legions of Asgore. The greenskins wasted no time in lashing out with a vanguard force. Raw ferocity pushed the surge of greenskins toward the dwarfs, but they held their ground. Infernal magic scorched the earth and filled the air with the overpowering waft of cooked urk. The orcs were forced back down the hill and into a retreat, and Drazhoath looked awfully pleased with himself. When the orcish war horns sounded again in the distance, he ordered his troops to follow the same game plan. Let them come, batter them with magic and gunpowder, let them crash upon his black iron shields and be cut down. As they advanced, hundreds of greenskins were laid low, and the arrogance of the Dawi-Zharr swelled. The volleys of the blunderbusses and fireglaves shattered bones and tore through flesh, but they did not slow down Grimgor. The flaming gazers and infernal hammers devastated the rank and file, but they did not slow down Grimgor. The shield warriors held the Black Orcs back with discipline and brutal tenacity, but they were like wheat to the scythe before the war boss. He tore through their lines like an avalanche, leaving devastation wherever he went. The realization hit Drazhoath. This was not just an orc he was dealing with. This was centuries of anger and resentment and unbridled rage. Grimgor decimated the legions of Asgore, and the mountains of Morn ran red. So it was written that Grimgor Ironhide, greatest of the Black Orcs, would someday shatter the Darklands and reduce the Dawi-Zharr Empire to dust. Drazhoath was never one to sit idle and let things happen. His fate was to stay exiled in the Black Fortress. He had no intention of seeing that happen, nor to let Grimgor's axe find his neck. In a contest of brute force, the Black Orc was unmatched, so Drazhoath would have to think outside the box, outpace him, industrialize. If 100 guns couldn't kill the war boss, he'd bring 1,000. Convoys were sent out, seeking labor for the ever-hungry war machine, slaves to drag materials from beneath the earth, feeding the factories and the endless bellowing of rancid smoke into the air. They needed a hell of a lot more firepower and far fewer goblins. The din of industry never ceased, as new buildings were erected, torn down and erected again in a mad flurry of industrial revolution. Slaves were sent to the building sites, and they never returned. Some say they were worked to death, others that they were ground up and used as mortar. Who's to say with the Chaos Dwarfs? The methods are questionable, but the results staggering. All Drazhoath knew is that he needed more armaments, more gold, more warriors, more slaves. Grimgor would come, and he would be ready. Armies were sent to the World's Edge Mountains, capturing any goblin that was too stupid to die. They ejected them from long-forgotten dwarven holds, claiming them for themselves. Mount Gunbad was a key acquisition, and its rich gold mines would be yet more fuel for the war machine. Drazhoath did disagree with the name, but nothing a new sign couldn't fix. Finally, the inevitable tide of Grimgor's fury spilled into the Darklands. He collapsed on a city and took great enjoyment in smashing up the factories. The Chaos Dwarfs marched to meet him before he could cause any more collateral damage. They'd said for weeks they would be ready, but when the time finally comes, how could anyone be ready for him? The confidence that rang out in their last meeting had evaporated. The dwarves were stern, cold, and their tension lay thick in the air. But they had something they didn't have last time. The newest advancements in Dhrath-Zharr technology. The sentient magma cannons gurgled and spewed impossibly hot lava across the greenskins. Iron demons maneuvered around the charging vanguard and unloaded on anything in their path. The fireborns surged across the battlefield and the greenskin lines were buckling. But Grimgor would not die. His army fled and they were hunted down. But the warboss would not relent. Alone on the field, his gargantuan axe licked out and pulverized anything it touched. Drazhoath attempted to finish him himself, a move that almost proved fatal. In the end, he was surrounded and brought down by blunderbuss fire, and Drazhoath prayed he wouldn't get back up again. But he probably would. The southern Darklands were retaken once again, and as Drazhoath wrestled with yet another threat on his doorstep, he couldn't escape the feeling that somewhere his rivals were looking down on him, constantly under siege from ogres, orcs, skaven and goblins, and finding it hysterical. He'd make them pay. He was certain. He didn't know how, and he didn't know when, but he would have his revenge. The Legion continued its bloody campaign through the Mountains of Morn. Craggy landscapes blended together as they were drawn into one violent conflict after another. They wrestled control of key settlements from the greenskins, reducing the orcs' crude fortifications to rubble. Sometimes he wondered what it was all for, spilling all this blood for these ramshackle hovels, engaging in an eternal tug-of-war with a warboss who didn't know how to die. Anytime he lapsed, he merely had to remind himself, it's all part of the plan. The big, important plan. Grimgor chose not to die after their previous confrontation and surged into the Dawi-Zharr with unbridled fury. It seemed impossible the way he fought. Drazhoath's warriors knew no fear. Their armor was heavy-set black iron and imbued with dark magic. Yet he cleaved through them with utter ease. He hefted his mighty axe as though it were weightless, yet it impacted with the force of a cannon blast. He broke through the ranks, but now the Legion had learned he can be stopped. Their panic was suppressed. Once more they stopped him on his rampage, and once more his forces were pushed back. It was a grueling campaign. Every inch cost pounds of black powder and a gallon of blood. Any progress seemingly unraveled as raiding parties would spill forth from the mountain and into the Darklands, smashing the factories and pillaging cities. In the World's Edge Mountains, there'd been a constant back and forth between the goblins and the hobgoblins, and a legion was sent to try and force Skarsnik out of Karaz-Akarak, though it was clear the cunning devil was up to something. Something probably quite terrible and probably very sneaky. Tunneling through the mountains themselves to return to the Darklands, the Dawi-Zharr faced the greenskins on their home soil in a display of raw cruelty beneath the Tower of Gorgoth. The mass melee of orc, goblin and chaos dwarf was a dervish of blood and guts and body parts. Screams of agony blended with roars of frenzy, occasionally overshadowed by the primal bellows of the great Taurus, ferocious beasts of muscle and malice that gored all in their path. As his gaze was drawn to his own lands, Drazhoath's campaign in the Mountains of Morn came under strain as the ogres, who were definitely all killed off just a few days ago, had begun to reclaim their lost camps.
I'll take everything you own. Nothing you can do about it.
Can't anyone in this land just stay dead? The Exile thought, and pointed his legion in the general direction of this new threat. He was ready for no more bad news, but it arrived anyway. Skarsnik, who it turns out definitely was up to something, had poured out from his usurped dwarven hold. The defending force figured they could even the odds by drawing the Groby into the trees and leveraging the element of surprise. And that may have worked, had Skarsnik not rallied just about every goblin in the World's Edge Mountains under his banner. Thousands of them surged forth, and though the defenders killed constantly and mercilessly, there were always more. A heaving mass of angry, biting, stabbing chaos. The goblins' place was in the mines, not out here causing a commotion. This was an unacceptable development in a long list of unacceptable developments. The economy was failing. The once constant groan of the factories began to splutter and wheeze. Drazhoath had threats on all sides, and every time he looked in a new direction, another problem sprang up. The ogres had sent a raiding party into the Darklands, and were once again smashing up things that did not need to be smashed. But if there's one thing the Ashen One had working in his favor, it's that everyone against him was so damn stupid. The ogres surged towards the city walls, bellowing challenges, threats, and cooking plans if they got their hands on the Dawi-Zharr. The key word there is if. The skeleton crew of defenders kept their composure, and when the ogre leader was within range, they opened fire. He hit the floor with a huge thud, and the rest of the attackers quickly realized that they'd made an even huger mistake in coming here. Yet another poorly planned attack was deflected from the industrial heartland, and the factories kept on churning out their armaments. The long campaign in the Mountains of Morn was reaching a fateful confrontation. Drazhoath had been removing the greenskins from settlements across the land, leading up to Carreg-Vrag, a former dwarven hold that was laid low centuries ago when attacked by ogres and giants. Where were they now? The orcs killed them, and then the Chaos Dwarfs killed the orcs, and now new orcs plus giants were attacking the Chaos Dwarfs. It's come full circle. Almost. The army brought to arms was immense. They even had some war machines with them, which, while primitive compared to the obviously superior Dhrath-Zharr counterparts, they could manage to throw a very large stone a very long way, and that does tend to sting if you get clipped by one. Though there'd be little time to use these contraptions, as Grimgor wanted this finished quickly. He barreled out ahead of his troops, eager to be up on the walls and burying his axe in black iron helmets. As he neared, the blunderbusses opened fire, with the Black Orc shrugging off a volley that would bring down a giant. The gunners fell back, and the Infernal Guard moved in to halt the warmonger. Donning black iron masks of shame, these warriors had faced a lifetime of violent servitude, trying to scrub their past misdeeds clean. The one who brought down the Orc would surely receive the honor of finally removing their helm. So you can imagine, they were a bit ticked off when they saw their warden and ruler swoop in to snatch the glory for himself. By Drazhoath's hand, Grimgor was brought down once again, and the assault dispersed, though, despite having been very clearly killed on the battlements and his body closely guarded, he was seen mere moments later, leading a new warband outside Carreg-Vrag. The orcs have a peculiar way with magic, and how would you explain something like this? It was probably Gork, or Mork, or both, or neither. Each time Grimgor fell in battle, however, a part of him seemed to waver and be lost, and that part was his brain. Each time his attacks got more and more outlandish, as though he had something to prove. Just no one knew what that could possibly be. He attacked a military caravan, which was being escorted by some of the most terrible creatures to walk the earth, a who's who of nightmarish, colossal beasts that would strike dread into any sane soul. But this is Grimgor, and he was thrilled at the prospect of fighting such things. And as his army was cut down, Grimgor found himself in a ring of beasts. His boasts and challenges echoed around the empty battlefield. The Dawi-Zharr watched in horror and amazement as the warboss took them on. His great axe licked out, toppling Charybdis.
I am the greatest.
He roared in glee as its great body thudded to the floor.
Grimgor's the greatest.
His words rang out again and again and again, until the fires in his eyes finally ceased. His body hit the earth with a mighty impact, bathed in the blood of monsters. And Drazhoath almost admired him. He'd been a thorn in his side for weeks. He was a constant reminder of the failures and hubris of the Chaos Dwarfs of old. His axe had brought low hundreds of Dhrath-Zharr, which was a travesty, and tens of thousands of hobgoblins. Which happens? Grimgor hounded him at every twist and turn. His guerrilla war through the Mountains of Morn meant every inch cost a pound of flesh and blood. The orc was destined to be a slave, but he punched that destiny in the nose and demanded more. And that gave the Exile something to think on. Drazhoath's next move would be a crucial one. But before he made it, there was a rather large obstacle in his way. Grimgor, yet again, being flattened by a mammoth wasn't enough, apparently. Drazhoath rolled his eyes and obliged. There's an odd sort of logic among greenskins. If a plan doesn't work 100 times, it's due to work the 101st. Once more, they saw the Dawi-Zharr prepare their war machines on the high grounds. Once more they saw the movement of bull centaurs in the forest and heard the sickening gurgling of the hell cannons. Once more, they witnessed Drazhoath atop his mighty bale Taurus cinder breath, goading them to labour up the hill to their doom. Grimgor ordered the army to charge straight at them, into the firing lines of the war machines and blunderbusses. And the greenskins all thought that that was the best idea he's ever had. The dwarfs were sturdy, but the flank buckled beneath the unimaginable force and ferocity of Grimgor. Drazhoath crashed down to meet him and ordered his troops back. The Urki-drazh was his. He was not scared of him anymore. Not that he was ever scared of him in the first place. The two engaged in brutal single combat, roars of challenges and boasts of greatness failing to cut through the grim determination of the demon-smith. The clash of steel was lost in the infernal boom of Drazhoath's malignant hellfire, and Grimgor was swallowed by the white-hot fires of Hashut. When the flames subsided, the life had been scorched out of him. He was dead, completely dead. For real this time, 100%, no coming back from this one. There will be no Grimgor in Act 3. Oh, do the other one. The final and irreversible death of Grimgor Ironhide left a power vacuum across the mountains of Morn. Famished for glory among other things came Greasus. Those of you who've been listening might remember that Greasus was killed off ages ago. Well, he's back, because no one knows how to die in this bloody land apparently. But he was not the only one trying to take advantage of the worn-down Dawi-Zharr military. Skarsnik was attempting to push the Chaos Dwarfs out of the World's Edge Mountains, and from the south came the Dragon Prince Imrik and his Knights of Caledor. In elvish circles, he was noble, haughty and proud, a tamer of dragons and a beacon of light in a forsaken land. To the Chaos Dwarfs, and the regular dwarfs for that matter, he was simply an elf. An uptight, snobbish, needlessly tall elf. Imrik was proving all of the Dawi stereotypes right by attacking unprovoked and hitting only undefended towns. When a defensive force was brought to arms against him, the elves did what elves have been known to do since the dawn of time. They ran away, again, and again, and again. If you're going to invade, at least have the decency to stand around and fight. With the greenskins, ogres and elves hitting him on separate fronts, Drazhoath was spread thin. Fortunately, he'd been exercising his cunning to secure treaties with Kugath, the Plague Master and pestilent servant of Nurgle. Unfortunately, Kugath had declared war on the eastern superpower of Cathay, dragging Drazhoath into one more war than he could handle. The world was at a boiling point, and you either picked a side or got torn up in the carnage. The exiled one knew the politics of Zharr-Nagrund, and he knew the best way to eliminate a threat. Divide and conquer. Don't charge headfirst into the biggest battle looking for glory like his idiotic cousins to the west. No, Drazhoath would take his threats one by one, crippling them before they could unite against him. Imrik was still running away like a milksop, though the constant looking over his shoulder meant he eventually ran straight into a mountain range. With nowhere left to go, the legions of Asgard fell upon him. Two narrow straits separated the armies, with hell cannon barrages halting any advance down one of them. Bull centaurs ploughed into the elves on the other side, while Drazhoath rained havoc down from above. Imrik, being a touch more intelligent than the foes faced previously, did not let the demon-smith cast his spells unhounded, and the two lords collided with terrible force. Dragon and Bale Taurus lunged for each other, while their masters traded blows and insults. The elf could put up a fight, much to Drazhoath's dismay, and in a fair contest, he might have bested the dwarf. But then that's another lesson crucial to survival in Zharr-Nagrund. Never fight fair. Drazhoath kept the Dragon Rider busy, while his forces overwhelmed and scattered the elves. With their master indisposed, Imrik's dragons were isolated, surrounded and brought down in clouds of black powder. Intent on matching wits and steel against the infernal sorcerer, Imrik was unaware of his lines buckling and his troops routing, and in a volatile mix of anger, fear and shame, he gave one last look at the wicked smirk of Drazhoath before fleeing the field. The Legion of Asgard gave chase, collapsing on cities in their wake. They fell on Anarel's tomb, plundering the explorer's mausoleum for all it was worth. The crippling defeat was the last hurrah for the elves in the region, and their invasion had been repelled and scattered by the Dawi-Zharr and their festering allies. They'd go down as a minor inconvenience in Drazhoath's saga, though their demise presented a problem.
Any more squeaking before I wring your neck?
Gorbad Ironclaw and his orcs were a stone's throw away, foaming at the mouth at the chance to scrap with the one who brought down Grimgor Ironhide, while Drazhoath always needed more bodies in his mines, and he would be all too happy to teach the insolent orcs the Zharr-Lid for dig or die. He also did not need another new front to think about. So, he struck up a bargain. They could have this grotty, pillaged town still laden with blood and guts and hacked off bits of elf. In response, the orcs would leave the Darklands alone, and Gorbad would look elsewhere for his scraps. Pretty fair arrangement, all things considered, though Drazhoath hid the other cunning detail of the deal, without knowing nor agreeing to it. The greenskins had set themselves up as a meaty barrier between the Dawi-Zharr and the men and dwarves of the West. Not that they were scared of any confrontation with them, I might add. No, Drazhoath had other plans in motion, and they required his full attention. Well, they would, if the whole grand scheme wasn't at risk of being unraveled due to a pressing war with Grand Cathay. Thanks again for that, Kugarth. The humans had started to press into the Mountains of Morn, and the mountains pressed back with hobgoblins, demons, and infernal machinery. The peasants that had been sent to scout the passages were slaughtered in cold blood, and the legions of Asgore readied themselves for the inevitable retaliatory attack. Despite his endless disdain for the Cathayans, Drazhoath had to admit they did outfit their army the correct way. They had people with guns, lanterns with guns, even the oxen had guns. They came with all manner of war engine and rained fire and vengeance upon the invaders, and the Dawi-Zharr matched their ferocity and firepower. The booming artillery echoed across the mountain ranges, and cold Cathayan steel met the black iron of Zharr, ever hot to the touch. They faced each other on ever-changing battlefields, and the Cathayans had no end of ingenious contraption or fearsome mythical beast to unleash upon the infernal dwarves. Their war machine was mighty, and their troops seemingly endless. Drazhoath was not in business to conquer them, just set them on the back foot, push them back from his borders, and show them that this is a fight they cannot win. He ordered a force to hold the passage between the mountain range and Cathay, and frankly, he didn't care how far they pushed, nor how many they killed. He just didn't want his plans interrupted. In the following weeks, the Demon Master traveled far and wide, gathering relics and artifacts of unimaginable power. He pried an ancient amulet swirling in forgotten magics from the cold, dead fingers of a vampire lord. Delving deep into the bowels of the earth, his force clashed with the disgusting imaginations of Nurgle and hammered a dwarven expedition force with great prejudice. The battles led him to the golden bands of Grimnir and the ever-burning helm of Grungni, timeless and unspeakably potent artifacts from days long past. Laden in the holy relics of the ancestor gods, Drazhoath bellowed out to Hashut and demanded the Darklands pay witness to him. The horns rang out, and the ground rumbled as the legions of Asgore marched on the hateful black ziggurat of Zharr-Nagrund. That which had been his home would tremble beneath him. His plans were weeks in the making, and saboteurs had already blasted great chasms in the walls. Bull centaurs and iron demons poured through them like a great gushing wound, harrying the defenders inside. Horrific great siege towers creaked and groaned as though they contained the echoes of some malign presence long past. The dripping maws of the hell cannon spat globs of furious magma onto the central gates as Kadai Fireborn watched on, eager to unleash their infernal rage on whatever lay beyond. Drazhoath did not want there to be any question of his victory here. He did not want this to be a heroic, well-fought struggle. He wanted a massacre. He wanted to humiliate all those who had a hand in his exile. A second force surged toward the western wall, and the central gates buckled and broke beneath the hell cannon assault. The Kadai burst through, the infernal spear tip of Drazhoath's unrelenting assault, and laid waste to the paltry resistance sent to stop them. To the east, 2 more siege towers rumbled into the walls and docked with mighty booms. Those that poured onto the wall, eager for bloodshed, were met with an almost insulting force of orc laborers. The slaves were cut down with the efficiency of a butcher culling cattle. The defenders rushed to plug the gushing breaches in the western wall, using their own siege cannons to melt the armor and bones of any who approached. Great Taurus demons crashed down to occupy them, while the vanguard wrested control of the courtyard. The attackers were losing ground, forced back inch by inch, as the defenders rallied at the gate, pushing back the enemy like a great groaning swell, barely contained and heaving with enough force. Even the most formidable waves eventually break. Drazhoath let out a prayer to Hashut that built into a piercing roar, and directing his hateful god's gaze upon his enemies, he unleashed centuries of malice and uncontrollable hatred upon the defenders. Their final stand proved futile. They were enveloped as one in the baleful fires of Drazhoath's wicked sorcery. As the dust settled, and the last of the flames licked the smouldering remains of the defenders, the city lay still. Zharr-Nagrund had fallen, but it would rise again, with Drazhoath as its tyrant lord. You might see this as a great betrayal, bordering on treason, but to the Dawi-Zharr, this was politics. Admiring his cunning and depravity, Zhartan the Black offered the new lord of Zharr-Nagrund an alliance, which was accepted. To ensure his rule was unquestioned, he made his most impressive creation yet, the Kedai destroyers, and unleashed them on any final pockets of resistance. Ostrogoth, Drazhoath's oldest rival, sought terms to a new agreement, but these were rejected. The exile would never forget the injustice scorned upon him, and once the capital was firmly under his control, he began the hostile takeover of Ostrogoth's land, armies, cities, and factories. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Drazhoath would not let his new subject out of his sight for a very long time. The war with Cathay raged on. Karazakarak, former mighty capital of the dwarfs, was defiled. Statues to the ancestor gods torn down and replaced with brazen idols of Hashut. The Darklands beat an industrial rhythm in black smoke and howling agony. Everything from the mountain ranges to the frozen sea to the sea of storms. It all obeyed Drazhoath. Completely, unconditionally. A tale of empire-shaking deceits and betrayal, bloodshed, slaughter, and grudges. But in the world of Chaos Dwarf politics, that's just Tuesday. And that was my narrative campaign for Drazhoath the Ashen. Or Drazhoath if you want. I don't even know what's correct anymore. If you've made it all the way to here, well done. You finished it. My greatest thanks unto you. My name is Willis, and this channel is my way of exploring the stories that come from some of my favourite games. I take a full campaign, squash it down, do some fancy editing stuff, and use all of that to tell a story. I'm starting with Warhammer 3 because I like it, though I'll be looking to do a campaign in another game soon. I'm leaning towards Age of Wonders 4 for that because it feels like a nice sidestep, but that's not set in stone. I've had a few requests to do a Chaos Dwarf campaign, and if one of those comments was from you, I hope I did it justice. And if you're upset about any of my pronunciation, I'll just say that I pronounce things the same way as my boy Jonathan Keeble. So, take up any arguments with him. I'll be coming out with these campaigns on the regular, and I'm always happy to hear suggestions for other lords and factions to add to my shortlist. This campaign has gotten me in a very dwarfy mood, and my next campaign will be with my fourth favourite slayer, Ungrim Iron Fist. So subscribe if you want to see him kill anything near him that moves. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. You've been amazing, and I will see you another day for another story.